Hello, my name is Mikael Kasurinen and I'm the lead game designer of Alan Wake. This is a video game commentary that spans throughout the whole game. Commentators will appear like this on the screen every time there's something that we like to talk about. But be aware that this commentary is full of spoilers. If you haven't played the game yet and you want to experience it as it was meant to be played, stop now, go back to the option screen and turn off the commentary. You can always come back later. This commentary is location based, so every time you hear a commentary that you want to listen to, stop moving and don't try to advance to the next location. Feel free to look around, but moving forward to the level might actually override the existing commentary. The only way to replay a comment is to restart the last checkpoint. Now, enjoy the commentary and have fun.
Hiya, my name is Tim Lundqvist. I'm one of the level designers of Alan Wake.
Hello, my name is Tero Tosa. I'm a senior environment artist at Remedy.
Hi, I'm Mikko Rautalahti and I'm a writer here at Remedy. Here we are in the very beginning of Alan Wake. Since dreams and dreamlike states are a big deal for us, it's kind of fitting that we start things off with a good old-fashioned nightmare. We also do a couple of other things here though. For example, we introduced Thomas Zane. We don't call him that yet, but that's what the big floating ball of light is. And we also do a tutorial here, and that was actually kind of challenging because it's not very easy to marry the idea of a story introduction and a tutorial together, but you know, I think we did an okay job.
You are hurt. You should go into the light.
The light pole that you see in front of you is a crucial piece in the gameplay of Alan Wake. We call them safe haven. It's a spot of light in the midst of darkness. It provides you safety. While the enemies actually don't want to go into light, they also heal the player faster and acts as guidance for the player. Every time you see light in front of you, that's usually a good direction to take.
Waves are both wilder and more serene. To its ports I beam. To its ports I beam. Do you understand?
No.
Follow my light. Your dream to teach you. The darkness is dangerous. It's sleeping now. When it feels you coming, it will wake up. There's no time.
In this scene, the diver takes control over Wake's dream to teach him how to fight the forces of darkness. The basic concept is simple. You turn the light on top of Taken and you can see the darkness burning away. After that, you are able to defeat Taken with your revolver. This is a good opportunity to see how the light mechanics work. Turn the light on top of him and you can actually see a small halo forming around him. The halo gets smaller, the less darkness there's left. And you can clearly see a light effect when the shield is burned away. The combat mechanics were always designed around the idea that you face multiple enemies at once. In this tutorial you only get one enemy at a time, but in the field that comes after this, you get 2 or 3 enemies at the same time. Then you get the proper feel of how the combat works. Be careful on who you are concentrating on, because someone else might actually be flanking you and trying to hit you in the back.
Remember what I've taught you. That is all. I will give you back your dream now.
In the nightmare, a terrible darkness was taking over the world. The lighthouse was the last safe place on Earth.
Let's act like we're on vacation. Go stand next to that ocean. I want a shot of you at the town.
The events of the game take place in the Pacific Northwest region of the United States. This is a beautiful region that has in the past been featured in numerous TV shows and movies, like The Shining and Twin Peaks. It's famous and recognizable for many things, like fishing and mining and huge redwood tree trunks the size of a bus, beautiful lighthouses. But I think the most recognizable and beautiful feature is the nature. It's an oceanic climate combined with huge mountain ranges and dark forests. The cool thing about it is that there's an enormous amount of moisture constantly flowing in from the Pacific Ocean, and when it hits the mountains it turns into fog. So the end result of that is that almost everywhere you look, there's these dense wisps of fog lazily crawling on the mountains and hillsides, and it really lends the area an almost otherworldly feel.
Fair enough. You can trust me to be discreet.
Just a couple
Not a
more.
hard man to track down if you change your mind, though. I hope you two have a lovely holiday.
I can't. I've got all your books.
Diners are the very essence of traditional Americana and the hearts of small-town communities, such as Bright Falls.
Well, okay.
There being so many of them, and many of them looking very much like each other, source material for this location was always going to be plentiful. But even so, from the start, we had a certain one in mind. If you can remember a certain black tie-wearing, pie-munching FBI agent who likes a damn fine cup of coffee, you'll know the one I'm talking about.
Number 6 in the jukebox. Don't go in there, young man. You can hurt yourself in the dark.
I didn't want to.
Wow. It's gorgeous, Alan.
It's something.
Bird Lake Cabin is an idyllic, a little run-down but nevertheless beautiful cabin nestled in a small island on the Cauldron Lake. But not all about it is as it seems. You see, in the 70s there was a big eruption and the whole island sank, and it took down the cabin with it. So it shouldn't really exist. Yet somehow it does.
Here we go.
The original idea for the Bird Lake Cabin was that it was actually alive, that it would roam about in the forests at night, rising onto its legs that would at daytime look like bird leg-shaped roots sticking out from under it. In the end, the story evolved into having the name of Bird Lake Cabin simply derive from the peculiar shape of the island and also from the frontal facade of the building, where a chimney, which looks like a beak, and 2 round windows looked like its face, and 2 porches, one on either side, looked like its wings.
An old generator had been connected to the power.
We spend a lot of time talking about Alice in the game, but we don't actually see all that much of her because she disappears. That's why it was very important for us to establish her as a major force in Wake's life in the very beginning of the game. Their relationship is very interesting because Alice is actually a lot smarter and stronger than Wake is. She's capable of manipulating him and is quite willing to do so if need be. That's how they end up at Cauldron Lake in the first place. But what she does out of love. She really just wants to help him. And he does need all that help because he kind of falls apart without her. She's a lot stronger than that. She could survive without him, but I'm not sure if Wake could ever live without Alice.
Okay.
All the lights were out.
Alan Wake has a lot of problems. His marriage is failing, he's suffering from the results of extremely poor impulse control, and frankly, the guy is a bit of a dick. He's not a bad writer, he's definitely a decent one, and obviously he's been very successful, but you know, it's probably not a coincidence that the moment he sets out to write this really good novel, he's not actually capable of even starting it. He's been disintegrating for a good while now, you know, too many parties, too much self-pity. He's just really not handling the situation well at all, and it doesn't help at all that he's using Alice as his muse without realizing that this actually places a great deal of pressure on her, because it kind of makes her responsible for his success as a writer, which is very unfair. Wake is definitely a flawed character, but I think he kind of grows on you. We wanted to avoid the video game stereotype. He's a writer, not a space marine. And it's kind of ironic, I think, that he really stands out from the crowd just by being pretty ordinary.
The guy's smug face.
Designing the environments, we are making full use of the diversity of nature in Pacific Northwest region.
Phone I could use.
In this episode, we find Alan Wake crashed in a car, unable to climb back to the road, and facing a long hike through the forest to reach a distant gas station where he hopes to find help. The area is a rocky, forested valley. He has to go through a logging site and also a marshland that follows the bottom of the valley and a river crossing. In the end, there is a vintage old gas station to explore, so really it's a visually very interesting location.
Well, As you can see, Wake has just found his first manuscript pages. They just sort of floated down from an unearthly light. And the manuscript is really one of our main storytelling tools in the whole thing, and one of our most important concepts in the entire game. And that stuff was actually really difficult to write because you don't have a lot of space there. You have a couple of paragraphs, and you kind of need to be able to tell a little story there.
Yeah, and I also think that manuscript pages are a big part of the whole Alan Wake experience. While it also tells a lot about the world itself, it also gives you a really deep history of different characters in the game.
Yeah, and it feels kind of natural too because we sort of made the pages a part of the whole thing. They're not just sort of random things in the on the sideline, but they're actually something that's really a part of the plot because they really are the plot.
Exactly, and I especially like the idea how certain pages actually predict some events that are going to occur in the future.
Yeah, we do a lot of foreshadowing there, but it's not, we don't really do the kind of a thing where we sort of hint at something. We actually come right out and flat out, say it, because that's sort of, we want to prove the player that, what's written on the pages actually literally happens in the game.
Yeah, it's really cool when that happens. If somebody actually reads the page and sees how the stuff unfolds in front of him while he plays it, I think that would be really cool for somebody. And it's so bad that I've actually read all the pages and I don't get that experience, but I would think that it's really cool when you actually experience it.
And I know a lot of players are probably just going to run through and just sort of skip the pages, and that's fine, you can do that, you can play a cool action game like that, but there's actually a lot more to the game than just the shooting.
Yeah, exactly. Even though most of the enemies attack you with melee weapons, some of them are able to use ranged weapons as well. I think it's way cooler when somebody's throwing stuff at you instead of shooting. Or maybe I just got tired of that in the previous games.
My head pounded with a concussion. I'd never fired a gun outside a shooting range. Something uncoiled itself inside my head. I realized that I'd have to find it. I didn't even...
Wake's newfound fear of water is a result of his plunge into Cauldron Lake. Of course, at this point in the story, he doesn't know what happened to him, he doesn't remember any of it, but on some subconscious level, he knows that he's been violated, and he associates that with the water.
The gas station was closer now. It's like
Most of the gameplay locations we have in the game incorporate the idea of a journey into them. It basically means that we try to show where player is coming from and where he's going to as often as possible. In the beginning of episode 1, this meant that we showed the lighthouse whenever possible, and of course now we use the gas station in similar role.
Here we can see some of the nasty enemies that we have. We call them flankers because they try to circle around you and stab you in the back, though they are quite easy to take out.
The journey from the crash card onwards has seen a steady escalation of suspense, and now we're wrapping it up with a meeting with possessed Carl Stucky.
It can be dangerous! It requires patience!
You're about to find the first TV at the gas station where we see Alan Wake raving like a lunatic. Cynthia Weaver actually talks about a similar thing later on in the game when she mentions that Thomas Zane has been talking to her from beyond and from television, and it's kind of a similar thing. Wake isn't aware of how it's happening, but that's what it is. We are thinking of Alan Wake as kind of a sum of three parts actually. Our writing, Ilkka Villis' face and body language, and Matthew Poretta's voice. And since we shot this stuff on video instead of producing it with our game engine, that's actually Alan Wake at his purest, you could say. And, not coincidentally, it's also Alan Wake at his craziest.
been some kind of fight.
All right. I'll keep writing. Outside there's only...
Back here, sweetie. How was it?
Worst weather I've ever seen.
We have two of these New York flashback scenes in the game, and actually we almost cut them out. And I'm very glad that we were able to keep them in because they are very important to the story that we're telling here. These are the days when the Wakes were actually happy. And we spent so much of the game in danger and in darkness, running around with guns blazing. And also, when we see Wake and Alice together, most of the time they're arguing or at least not being very happy. But these are the days when they were both very, very happy together, and these are the days they long for. In the second flashback sequence, towards the end of the game, you can see the cracks there. They aren't really doing very well anymore, but right now, this one, it was good.
Coffee's on.
Great. Just don't mind Walter in there. He's one of our regulars.
In many small towns, life is peaceful and not that much happens that really requires police intervention. Such is the case with Bright Falls also. And the sheriff station is really a friendly, almost cozy place. Indeed, the jail cells are more often used to sober people up than holding anyone for a longer period of time.
The early morning light hurt my eyes and made my head ache. The man on the phone had said, "Go through the fence on the left." Ed.
Jeez, Mr. Takes a swing at everybody.
The visitor center is the hub of Elderwood National Park area. It's a place where you can get information about the local wildlife, directions if you are going out hiking in the forest, or keys if you are renting one of the cabins in the area. It also has a nice cafeteria which looks out into the forest. It's a bright and beautiful place to stop for a while and have a cup of coffee, but it's also filled with lots of stuffed animals and mammoth skeletons and so forth, so it's not really a place that you'd want to visit at nighttime, which is what you will be doing.
But when you start confusing fiction with reality, you're buying yourself a ticket
Wait
to the
here.
funny farm.
Easy there, boy. I'm almost done.
Just be careful with the natives.
Barry is a very fun character to write, and frankly, a big part of that is Fred Berman, who does Barry's voice. And he's a cool guy because it doesn't matter how stupid the thing I write is, he actually always makes it sound good. He would just always find the right tone for Barry and sort of make him human even though he's saying something completely idiotic. Barry's a clown, of course, and you could call him a greedy little weasel and you wouldn't be far off from the truth. But at the same time, he's a loyal friend and he's smarter than he lets on. And, he's got the flaming eye of Mordor, so, that goes a long way.
I'll be with you in spirit.
Help me understand what had happened. The only way to make sure that Rusty
Well,
was safe
right now Rust is still alive, but that's not gonna last for long. He's a couple of minutes away from being turned into one of the Taken.
And we worked on Taken for a long while, and when we initially started to build the concept, the basis was on serial killers from comics and movies.
Right.
We wanted to almost seem like immortal enemies, and they always turn up when you least expect them.
Yeah, and they seem kind of mindless. Well, that's because the Dark Presence just sort of strips everything away from them. It just leaves this empty shell and fills it with darkness and sort of throws them at you. They're really about aggression, and they don't really do subtle.
And that's exactly why we love the melee weapons, right? And we actually considered giving them firearms at one point, but when we tried that, I think it took away something from the unique feel of combat. That
Because we kind of want them to come at you.
Yeah, they need to be aggressive, right? And I think the melee weapons also represent something old and mythical, what the Dark Presence is, unlike the light, which is modern and technical.
Yeah, and of course you probably noticed that they keep on babbling all the time. Well, you have, but I'm talking to a player here. That was actually kind of an experiment because we just wrote some of that stuff on a whim for Stucky in the beginning, and when we got the lines back from the actor, it was creepy as hell. So we, of course, decided that we gotta have more of this stuff, and we just wrote more of it in.
Yeah, exactly. It was excellent.
The Elderwood National Park sits in the middle of the dark and majestic Elderwood Forest. It's a place that features bare sun-bathed mountainsides and tall redwood forests and temperate rainforests and marshlands. Despite some hiking trails and friendly signs, it's nevertheless a wild place like nature is, and you shouldn't venture out too far into it after dusk. This place is inspired by the many beautiful nature preservation parks that are a staple of Pacific Northwest. And as we do like to throw the player out into the forest a lot at nighttime, this location really is in the essence of our gameplay.
Oh, I've got a gun. Just keep that light steady on him.
It took a moment.
I love this scene. This is where we show the handheld flare for the first time. It's a really effective defensive weapon. It pushes the closest enemies away, drains their shields, and actually makes them retreat. It's really useful when many enemies are attacking you at the same time and you're really in trouble. We also have a twist in the gameplay here. We actually take away your gun, and you need to rely on mod to be able to survive. You need to use the flashlight to keep the enemies away and stay close to mod.
I swear I'll kill you if you hurt Alice! Do you hear me? Come back here!
Shaping this area of dark foggy forest into a playable area has been challenging. We wanted to give the player the impression of being lost without making the navigation ever annoying. Also, we noticed that the journey has been quite long through the national park and many players wanted to pick up the pace this far. This basically meant that we did have to close off some of the branches we originally thought would be great to explore here.
Here we have the first driving scene. The vehicles were originally designed to be used as weapons against the dark forces. The headlights are used to burn the darkness away, and you finish them off by driving over them. Along the way, vehicles became a more important part of level design, and scenes which use vehicles are clearly differentiated from basic foot combat sections.
That Rose, she's a nice girl. Always pays her rent on time.
As I was saying, Al, I found all sorts of weird stuff from the local
The trailer park where Rose lives is a cozy place that recently had a bit of a shock when a sailing boat picked up by a tornado crashed in the middle of two trailers. This is a location that for a long time looked like it was not going to make it in the final game. But I'm glad it did, because I think it's one of those places that helps define the character and style of the game in a visual way. When we went out photoshooting along the Pacific Northwest area, we came across many trailer parks, and we have plenty of material for them. So I think that really shows in the authenticity of this location.
So much so that the place came to be called
Zane.
So handsome.
My gun and flashlight. I have to find a way to get buried.
The Dark Presence is the main adversary in our game, and I wouldn't necessarily call it evil, but it is completely alien to our world, and that may pretty much be the same thing. We don't really want to explain the Dark Presence in too much detail. We kind of want it to remain a mystery, but let me say this much. It's definitely not human. It doesn't think the way we do. A good example of this would be when Wake actually escapes from the cabin, and he actually just sits there and writes the whole thing into the story, and the Dark Presence is right there, and it just doesn't understand what's going on. It doesn't work on that level of logic. On the other hand, it can be very devious. For example, it has no problems whatsoever using Alice and Rose against Wake in a very, very sort of, contrived manner, and it works very well too. We talked quite a bit about the Dark Presence being weak in the beginning of the game, and that's true as far as it goes, but it only refers to the foothold it has in our world. Now, it is strong, it is very, very strong and very, very big in its own world.
It took me a moment to recognize the flashbang.
Here we see one of the most useful tools that the gameplay designers have. We call it beds, for bringing enemies to the scene. It started off as a simple spawning system, but as time went on, it evolved into something bigger. It actually now incorporates build-up as well. You hear the whispers and sounds that the darkness creates, and, well, the darkness itself actually appearing in the forest. It hides the enemies when they actually get close to you. On top of that, we have a reveal system which shows the first enemy attacking you, but we do it only once per combat. After that, you're on your own.
I hope Maine could lend me a car to get to the crew.
We don't see a lot of Pat Maine in the game, but actually he has a considerable presence. One of the problems with Alan Wake was that we really wanted to maintain that small town atmosphere, but that's very hard to do when, you don't actually spend a lot of time in the small town itself. A familiar and dependable radio solved that problem. Also, I think RJ Allison, who plays Pat Main, did a wonderful job. He really nails the character, and it's so great to be alone in the dark and then hear that warm and dependable voice.
Well, thank you very much for that compassionate viewpoint, Lorna. Oh, here's a little surprise. The famous writer Alan...
You yet, even if it kills me, you hear me?
Here we have another really well set up journey. The train depot and the bridge in the distance well visible from early on. As an interesting side note, this whole area was originally just a minor branch, not even a branch. Alan Wake just basically had to get a car from the forest and continue towards the mining museum. With months of iteration and looking at the possibilities given by the environment, we found out that this area could have lots of poltergeist events, could have hidden routes and so forth. The bridge and the train depot all appearing far later in their development.
But she had called me. I could see a railway bridge up ahead.
Everybody knows the movie Poltergeist, but I wouldn't say that it was the origin for this idea. This game is about possession. It's about the dark presence taking over everything in the world. It started off with humans, and, well, in the design, the inanimate objects were the next logical step. One of the hardest things to do was to convey intent. The objects don't have any body language, unlike the Taken. How we ended up with the current feature was that the lead writer actually encountered a problematic physical object. It flickered around the terrain erratically, and you really couldn't tell what is going to happen next. And that ended up being a real feature. And here you can see the result.
The darkness that was...
The dark presence can take over almost anything. That includes machinery like vehicles. In the next scene you will see the bulldozer attacking you, and it might be familiar to you from demos that have been shown in different shows before. I would like to say that plenty of thought and research went into this, but the fact is that it was basically just a lucky test when we fooled around with the AI and physics. And here you can see the results.
Today, I would meet the kidnapper.
This daytime driving sequence is great to have in the final game, especially considering that it was a source of debate earlier on. It's fairly hard to actually see this kind of sequences, are they actually working or not, before we have the final environment, the mood, the sounds and so forth. Of course now it is great to have in the final game. It provides a very nice change of pace in the middle of episode 3, and it provides a great showcase for our technology, our views, and also it's great to see the environment that you usually see in the night, covered in shadows and in fog, in its full glory.
The feel of history and roots is somehow very present in the whole Pacific Northwest area. It's one of those things that lends the unique feel to this region. This was once a very inaccessible and thus isolated region, but in the turn of the 19th and 20th century, as railroads started getting built, it was suddenly connected to the rest of the country. This greatly benefited industries like mining, for example, because now ore could easily be transported across vast distances. Towards 1960s and 1970s, mining steadily declined, but this area is still filled with all sorts of landmarks and reminders of that once blooming industry. To me, these kinds of things really matter because they are the reason behind why things are and look the way they are. So, long story short, decaying structures like old train carts and mining structures and tipple buildings are really a part of the history of this area, and that's all the reason we needed to include one of those beautiful tipple buildings as a location in the game. As many of its real-world counterparts, it serves now as a museum.
I was early. I was
Okay, now this whole kidnapping thing is a red herring, of course. It's just an attempt to manipulate Wake and to get him to deliver the manuscript. The so-called kidnapper Mott, well, he doesn't have Alice, he doesn't know where Alice is, and neither does Dr. Hartman, the guy who's hired Mott. But they do know that Wake will do anything to get Alice back, so you know, they use her. They're nice people like that. The problem is that Wake doesn't have the manuscript at all. He doesn't know where it is, he has a couple of pages, but of course that's not enough. So, they're lying to Wake about having Alice, and Wake is lying to them about having the manuscript, and nobody has much of anything. It doesn't end very well for Mott, you know, who is going to get his in a couple of minutes, or no, a little longer. And Dr. Hartman doesn't have such a great day either. No, what can I say? Karma's a bitch.
Our technology enables us to have a set of ready-made landscape types that tile seamlessly with each other and can be used to quickly lay out large sections of terrain, instantly creating realistic landscapes. These biotypes, as we call them, contain lots of different information about the resulting shape of the terrain. Things like what the ground is comprised of, is it mud, rocks, or grass, what grows on it, different kind of foliage and trees, and also its bumpiness. So we don't manually build every square meter of forest that there is in the game, but instead focus our efforts on creating these biotypes so realistic that they can be used to cover a patch of terrain of almost any size and still look realistic. We then cover the terrain with patches of different biotypes that go together very well before finally going over the area with a precision polish.
We chose birds as our only animal enemy type. The main reason being that the birds actually bring something new to the table, an extra dimension. We try to think through the whole package of the player experience. Plan is to look down for bear traps, look ahead for taken, and look up for the birds.
The guys who did this mine puzzle, Antti and Tiago, did a really amazing job here. This is again one of the cases where we started with a very low-key design requirement, just something to occupy the player for a moment. But with iteration, looking at what works, what not, we actually got this amazing sequence which does what it's supposed to do. It looks complex, it looks imposing, but it's very intuitive to play, and I hope you actually enjoy going through it.
In a similar vein to how we handled the different types of terrain with biotypes, we have a preset system for weather styles as well. The game engine lets us control numerous parameters, things like cloudiness, wind, rain, and also lighting parameters, things like color, intensity, and blooming, to create truly stunning weather effects. Using this technology, we have created a palette of ready-made weathers that can be called upon at any time, so really it is weather on demand at the push of a button. Each level has its own, or sometimes many, different styles of ambience, and so their own mood.
I felt groggy. Whatever Hartman was making me numb.
As far as the bad guys go, Dr. Hartman isn't the main villain here, but he's probably a little more interesting than the Dark Presence. He's a very smart guy, and he knows a lot about the Dark Presence and Cauldron Lake in general. He kind of presents himself as a pop psychologist to the stars, but that's kind of a ruse. He just wants creative people in so he can exploit them. With Wake, of course, he resorted to a little more drastic measures. You know, he pretended to have kidnapped his wife, fished him out of a lake, you know, tried to convince him that he was schizophrenic, and it doesn't end very well for him, but, you know, it's a valiant effort anyway. We have a lot of backstory for this guy, and I'd love to do a little bit more with him in the future, but, you know, of course, we don't exactly leave him feeling very well at the end of this one.
Now, why don't you come with me? We'll reacquaint you with my clinic and go over everything you might have forgotten. Little walk and some fresh air? Yes, it will do you good. We go this way, Alan.
I wasn't ready for the
Cauldron Lake Lodge is the residence and place of practice for Dr. Emil Hartman, who uses it as a sort of a nursing home and also a place of inspiration for artists he treats there. Built in the turn of the century, it is an imposing building, hewn from large timber and heavy stone, with a steep shingle roof to weather off even the heaviest of snowfalls. The starting idea for this location was the real-world hotel of Timberline Lodge that they used in the movie Shining, but following the typical style of these buildings and the heavy materials used in the construction, it quickly evolved into a thing of its own.
By nature, Alan, we both know this. Everything can be explained logically.
Story-wise, the most important location in the game, Cauldron Lake, is inspired by the real-world location of Crater Lake in Oregon. It's a vast lake formed from a volcano thousands of years ago in a massive eruption. It's truly a breathtaking place that anyone interested in such things should definitely visit. In the game, the location, this Cauldron Lake, has actually had two notable eruptions. One that originally formed the lake, and then another which took down a small island in it, along with its cabin and even a person, a diver called Thomas Zane. The place is said to hold an ancient power, and it's not without reason, as you will find out playing the game.
Funny, I don't recall there being a mention of that in the weather forecast. Well, no matter. This way. Follow me.
The Haunted House sequence went through a lot of iterations during development. We had as extreme routes as Alan Wake, actually going behind and below the lodge on the mountain cliffs and fighting against possessed patients. Eventually it was great that we focused on the poltergeist events because it allowed us to create a nice chain of smaller, light-based puzzles, and it also wrapped up really nicely with the big poltergeist fight in the main yard.
As the Dark Presence attacks the lodge, we are seeing an escalation in its power and aggressiveness. Maybe even some frustration. It's now been chasing you for quite a while and with little success. And now that you are on its home court, so to speak, it's literally throwing stuff at you left and right. It's a good thing that the lodge is built to handle heavy storms, or otherwise it might come crashing down on you with all the furniture that's flying around. This scene is kinda like an action puzzle where you have to react to fast-changing conditions and find your way out of the building before it's too late. Fans of Max Payne 1 might have a fleeting sense of familiarity here.
Originally, the hedge maze actually was a circular shape. It looked great from the aerial shots, and everything was pretty good as long as you actually didn't go in there. But playing a maze with all the corridors in various curves just didn't really work, and we then went with this more traditional setup.
Oh, man, you're okay! Jeez, it's good to hear.
Here we have, once again, a twist to the gameplay. We actually take away the light, the main tool of the player. The point of this scene is to demonstrate how utterly helpless Wake is without his light against the forces of darkness. There really isn't any other option here but to run or die.
It's like a sheer wall. Ah! Al! There's something moving down here! Barry, it's a Taken! Use a flare, Barry! Ah! Yeah! Barry, are you alright?
This area is the Anderson farm. In the game we have these two goofy guys called the Anderson brothers. They used to live here, but with time they have gone a bit funny in the head, and now they spend most of their time at Hartman's clinic, although they do wander off all the time.
Yeah, they were in a band called the Old Gods of Asgard, and they actually pretended to be Nordic gods. And that whole rock and roll lifestyle thing was just a little bit too much for them. And it probably didn't help that they actually made their moonshine with water from the Cauldron Lake. These guys are nuts.
Yeah, but this is a really cool location. It used to be an ordinary farm, but as these guys led their rock and roll lifestyle, they made it into their own image, and they built this stage in the middle of the cornfield and even decorated the farmhouse with Viking imagery. They had some serious parties here. This whole Viking thing was like a lifestyle for them, and in the end they started to believe in their own characters. Unfortunately, it went a bit too far, and they woke up the Dark Presence with their music.
Yeah, this all took place not long after Zane had managed to put the Dark Prince down in the first place, and the Dark Prince really messed with their heads, and that's another reason why they're so crazy. And eventually they managed to put it back down, but unfortunately they didn't really do a very good job of it. And I guess that's good, because if they had, then we wouldn't be having a story here at all.
That's true. These guys really aren't that good with details. They sort of let the Dark Presence hanging in limbo, kind of like waiting for somebody to come along and put it back into business.
Cue Alan Wake.
Oh yeah.
I could sense the movement.
And here the player gets the light back to basics. A good boost, as you know, blinds the enemies and slows them down, and that's the only way to survive through this situation. You still need a weapon to be able to defeat them, so the only option is to continue running.
But there was no sight of the driver.
The journey from the crashed car, the second one we have in the game, up to this hunting cabin has been fun to develop. It was really cool to see different things, try different things that work out with Wake being very vulnerable. Originally, we tried giving Wake just less ammunition, less batteries. Then we took the revolver away for quite a long time. And in this final version, you actually start the whole journey without any kind of light source either.
Need a car to get there fast. If Barry wasn't up here, he was probably in trouble.
The farmlands area has been one of the most liked areas during early gameplay testing. I think the big element to this is that we have very many different gameplay types during this journey. We just had a very tightly planned, very tightly designed survival journey up to this hunting cabin, and then again now we give the player a car, we give a direction, and we give the player the chance to actually dictate his own pace for a while.
Was awesome!
Bright Falls, rock and roll capital of America.
Children of the Elder God, what a great song to kick ass to. I think the whole stage fight sequence is going to be one of the most memorable moments for a lot of people, simply because it's just such a ridiculous action-packed sequence. The music is actually by the band Poets of the Fall, who have a long history of collaboration with Remedy. We kind of wanted this to sound like 70s heavy rock, and I think they did a fantastic job of that, and from what I hear, they had a good time doing that too. They also did the other song that you hear a little bit later at the farmhouse, The Poet and the Muse, and that's of course a more of a ballad, but you know, still a very nice song. The lyrics of both songs are actually based on poems by our lead writer Sam Lake.
This is as far as I got before they ambushed me.
From the story point of view, this is a tremendously important sequence in the game. This is kind of where we reveal everything that happened during that missing week, and it's a kind of a dream sequence or a time traveling trip, something that's brought on by the Andersons' mystical moonshine. And it doesn't really matter whether Wake is actually literally there or if he's just observing things through some sort of a memory form or whatever. He's there and he's seeing what's happening. For us, this was a kind of a show don't tell kind of a thing, because we could have turned this into a very long cinematic, but we kind of wanted the player to be able to observe things.
I remembered being surprised to see the cabin dark. Alice would have never turned the lights off.
Stay cool. I can get the emergency power.
We like to keep things a little vague, because once you start explaining things in great detail, you kind of lose a lot of the magic. That said, I think it's very clear to everybody by now that Bright Falls is a very weird place, and it's not just about Cauldron Lake and what dwells within. Sarah Breaker is the sheriff here, and given the nature of Bright Falls, she has a fairly difficult job. Once you're the sheriff here, you're not just writing parking tickets, you're actually responsible for the entire community. And that's why her view of this whole thing is a little different than Wake's, because, you could say that Wake's goal is a little bit selfish, because it's all about his wife and his marriage. And Sarah is a little bit more community-minded, because she's really fighting to save Bright Falls from this threat.
The town of Bright Falls is a sleepy, idyllic small town, the type that's familiar from much of popular culture, where little happens and time almost seems to stand still. The heaviest influences for this location were the town of Snoqualmie, where they shot Twin Peaks, and also the town of Roslyn, the location for Northern Exposure. If you've seen these shows or visited similar locations, you might recognize the dreamlike, almost peaceful ambience that they often seem to have. It's as if time is reluctant to move on, sort of clinging back to the glory days when the town was born, where industries like mining and logging were booming. It is genuine Americana, and I think we have captured it quite well.
Bright Falls was a very, very challenging location. All the branches of the journey to feel natural. The town was designed quite a bit earlier than we actually settled upon the final storyline, the twists and the specifics, what actually happened there. This meant we had a lot of problems. We actually got where Alan Wake and Sarah go to pull this branch, this harborside building that you're now just past. The process when we noticed that having the whole that well as we expected for combat.
That's him. That's the way to the chopper.
Even though for a town it's a gameplay location, it is huge. There are many buildings and have interiors or had them at some point when earlier story revisions saw it. As many large gameplay locations, it has been through countless of revisions and iterations, and unfortunately not all the stuff that there once was survived. If you think about it in terms of time lost making something that eventually didn't make it in the game, but actually all those changes simply served to make it richer and more varied. It's the same way that real towns actually acquire their appearance. You could say the process has given it a small history of its own.
It's like a super...
The fire station on the hill side was actually the last building that was built. When we settled upon how the journey ends with the helicopter, when we found a good location for the helicopter, it basically meant that we need to find an iconic building. Was the for the helipad, and when that was decided, everything kind of like locked into place. The fire station looked, and the fire just kind of like worked perfectly for the fight layout.
This warehouse is filled with gas bottles. They can be used to dispose enemies without using the flashlight at all. Just shoot the bottles so that they explode. But be careful that you don't get hurt by yourself. The same thing applies to the transformer yard which comes after the warehouse. They can use boost or bullets to force enemies into electric cables.
This area is all about electricity. We're actually in a huge dam complex right now. What we're seeing across the river is the power station. The actual dam is higher up in the mountains, and right now we are in the transformer yard area. Pacific Northwest is filled with places like these power stations, and we just had to have one in the game.
Yeah, and since you do need power to keep the lights on, it's kind of fitting this is actually a very important part of the story.
Yeah. But it's a little odd, don't you think, for an old lady like Weaver to just manage this whole complex by herself?
Oh, hell no. You know, that's how they roll in Bright Falls. But it doesn't hurt that it's also a visually stunning location.
Yeah, you can really see far from the top, and that's an excellent opportunity for us to flex the engine and show what it can do.
Another example of gameplay growing from fairly small designs was this journey to cut the power to transform a yard. We had just a bare minimum bonus version in place for a while. Wake goes outside the power plant, flicks a switch, done. But obviously, after a few months of iterating, trying all the cool things, we noticed that, well, of course it works better when we have this combat, build-up, and the fairly simple, but hopefully enjoyable puzzle in the end.
I could see the kill switch that would cut the power to the transformer yard. Now worry about her.
Cynthia Weaver, like Wake, has been touched by the dark presence, and like Wake, she sees things that other people can't. She's the one who's been helping Wake, she's been leaving the supplies for him, she's been painting the weird messages on the walls, the ones that are revealed by light, and the thing is that nobody else can actually see them, only the people who have been touched like this. To everybody else it seems like she's just, painting with imaginary paint on the walls, but it is actually real. It's a kind of a mystical thing. Cynthia knows a lot about fighting the Taken and the Dark Presence, but she's really not a warrior. She's too crippled for that by her encounter with the strangeness that sort of permeates the area. When she refuses to follow Wake into the darkness and to rescue Barry, she's not being petulant about it, she's just physically unable to enter these areas of uncontrolled darkness. You'd have to drag her there, and if you did, she'd try to kill you. But, let's put that in perspective, because, she's guarding a secret she doesn't really understand anything about, because a man on her TV screen told her that she has to, and she never really had any choice about it. So, it's not easy for her either, but, all things considered, I think she does okay.
The tornado is one of the few enemies that has stayed pretty much the same throughout the whole project. Of course, it's not a real tornado, but a manifestation of the dark presence. One of the challenges was to create a look for it that the player really wants to turn away and run. We spent plenty of time designing the visual looks and audio so that this is conveyed in the best possible way.
I needed my sunglasses and painkillers to dull the pain. In one of my finer moments of self-deception, I swore to quit.
The New York apartment is one of my favorite locations in the game. From a story point of view, its role is of course to provide the background story for the relationship of Alan and Alice. But to me, there is another important aspect as well. You see, it's of course also a homage to the New York setting of the Max Payne games. And my first 3 years here at Remedy were spent working on those games. Now that we're working on Alan Wake with its Pacific Northwest theme style, that's something really different. And so for me, the location of New York apartment was really a wonderful chance to sort of touch back upon those old Max Payne days and sort of go back to my roots. It's kind of like picking up an old tool and seeing if you still remember how to use it.
The pills worked fast. I could still chalk everything up to
One question that's often asked about games these days is open world or linear. They are the two extremes of the same scale, and both have their pros and cons. Open world is of course all about the freedom of movement. You can go where you want and do what you want. And that's cool in itself, but by nature it fights against the traditional storytelling. Whereas linear gameplay fits storytelling very well, but that can get a bit constricted at times if the path is too narrow. We always want to tell a meaningful and compelling story, and we didn't want to compromise that in any way. But at the same time, we had lots of different scenarios and beautiful nature, and we didn't want to throw that away either. So what we did was intersperse it between the important story locations. So there is plenty of chance to explore your surroundings and plenty of cool stuff to find if you do.
We're nearing the end of the story here, At this point, we pretty much know the answers to most of the major questions, such as what happened to Alice, where did the manuscript come from, and so forth. All that remains for Wake now is to make his final run into the Heart of Darkness and make his final sacrifice. He's said goodbye to his best friend. He's not really expecting to come back from this one, but he's willing to do that to save Alice. I'm not really sure if you could call Wake a heroic character as such. You know, he doesn't really, he doesn't have the square-jawed look or anything, but when it's all said and done, I really don't think he's a coward.
As Wake continues towards the conclusion of his story, of this story, we had the chance to create more outlandish sequences, more wilder places to really amp up the action. This field filled with burning wreckage was great, and I hope you actually find and you see the possessed monster truck. He's been around different locations during the development, but I'm happy he finally found a place to actually be here amidst all the carnage. To be honest, the development this final stretch of the journey wasn't quite as smooth as we'd hoped. The environment, the scope of this area east to the Golden Lake is massive, and we had problems in actually polishing everything to the degree we wanted. That being said, it's been great that, for example, here in the junkyard, we managed to create the massive swinging crane to hang above the fight, and we did chance to create the burning piles of wreckage on the hillside. The nature of the Dark Presence definitely helped us when we had to make things, when you actually just have to, just bigger and louder. A player is fairly familiar with the idea of trekking through a haunted forest or dark forest by this point in the game, but we had a chance to, just when we needed, to throw entire boats and train carriages to the player, just creating total havoc.
Do as you're told.
This is the final battle in the game. You can actually finally face the tornado and fight it. We didn't want to create a complicated puzzle, but this was more about the experience. We wanted to make this a memorable moment in the game. If you look carefully, you can actually see Barbara Jagger standing in the middle of the tornado. And she's the only thing standing between you and Golden Lake.
With it.
At this point, it's pretty much over, and the Dark Presence knows that. It's still trying a couple of dirty tricks though, like dressing up as Wake's wife, but Wake isn't really buying it. I mean, he knows who he married, and this thing here just isn't it. The Dark Presence is kind of desperate, as you can tell. It's trying all sorts of stupid little parlor tricks to fool Wake. We get some disembodied voices later on, but none of it is going to work. Alice wants to describe Wake as the most stubborn man she's ever met, and that kind of determination goes a long way in the Dark Place. Wake's manuscript is one of our main storytelling tools in the game, and it has a lot of power. It's not just about a couple of words on a page, but at the same time writing those pages was really difficult because we don't have a lot of space there, and you still need to be able to tell these sort of little stories with a beginning and an end, and that was really challenging for us.
I like to think that the manuscript pages define a lot of the Alan Wake experience. While they also provide relevant information on how the world works, they also gives you a deeper access of the histories of certain characters.
Right. It's a really nice way of adding a little bit of depth and complexity into the whole game, and at the same time the pages themselves feel kind of relevant to the whole story because, well, they are the story.
I especially like the idea how they predict certain events in game as they like unfold in front of the player as written, and it doesn't have to be tied into writing.
Yeah, it's really more about the sort of creation rather than the method of creation.
There's a lot of potential here.
Yeah.
Who are you? What have you done with my Alice?
Alan? What are you doing? Put the light back on! What are you doing, Alan? Stop!
And that's it for the commentary. Thank you for hanging around all the way to the end. I hope it answered any questions that you might have had after completing the game. And maybe it showed you a bit how Remedy works. Thank you.
I will help you reach your masterpiece. I will love you forever.
No, you're not Barbara Jagger. I made a terrible mistake. I should have never written you back. You came back wrong. Your heart is filled with darkness.
Put that knife away, Thomas. Put it down.
My heart is filled with darkness. I'll cut it out. Take you back to the depths you came from.